Sami El-Yousef. Sami I've known for several years. Obviously, Peter's known him longer than I. Sami is a good friend of ours. We've done a lot of work together. Sami's position as Chief Executive Officer of the Latin Patriarchate. And I think, Sami, am I right in saying you're the first layperson to have that role?
That is correct.
Okay, and before that, you were in the Pontifical Mission, heading that unit. So you've spent your life supporting social work and social support for the Christian community across the Holy Land. And that's why we do work alongside each other. We can talk a little bit about that. And the other person on the call this evening from the Holy Land is Laila Asfoura. I think Laila was one of the founding committee members of Friends of the Holy Land all those years ago, although you still look 21, Laila. And Laila is a very active Christian woman business person. Of course, at the moment, sadly, there's not huge amounts of business because Layla's in the tourism area, which has been so badly affected over the last several years. I mean, obviously, in the war, there's not been anybody visiting, but tourism only really picked up again, I would suggest, at the end of 2022, after the COVID and travel restrictions that followed after that. So I'm very grateful to both of you, both Sami and Laila, for being here this evening. The format is I'm going to ask Sami to speak for a little while. We'll have a very brief time for questions after Sami has spoken. I'll have Laila speak for a little while, and again, a short time for questions, very brief. I will speak about how we are trying to respond to what you'll hear about. And then we'll have like a general question time for about 10-15 minutes and conclude the meeting. So I hope that's good for everybody. If you could please, until you perhaps are asking questions, leave yourself muted. And if you have questions, please put them in the chat. I'll monitor the chat so we can do the questions at the appropriate time. Sami, could I ask you to start us off?
Certainly. Thank you, Brendan, for the invitation, and thank you all for being with us this evening. Brendan gave me almost an impossible task. He said you have about 10 minutes and you need to speak about the impact of the war on society at large, on the Christian community, on Gaza, West Bank, East Jerusalem, and what the Latin Patriarchate is doing. So I'll try to be as brief as possible so that I try to be as close as possible to the time slot allotted to me. I'll start with Gaza. Of course, I'm sure you've been following the news, otherwise you wouldn't be here tonight. Gaza is a devastated strip of land where nothing remains standing, almost nothing remains standing. The destruction has been so widespread that you hardly find any roads to drive on, any buildings that are standing. Most schools, hospitals, infrastructure has completely been destroyed, businesses destroyed, no infrastructure, as I said, no electricity, no running water, no sewage system at all, outbreak of diseases, outbreak of hunger, and people under continuous shelling almost 24/7, in a sense, for the past 11 years. So honestly, I don't know how these people continue to survive under these circumstances, but they do. And they still have hope, and they're really our heroes as far as we're concerned. As far as the Christian community is concerned, their situation is not much different from the general population at large, in a sense. Even with the number of deaths, if you look at how many people have sort of lost their lives during since the beginning of the war. At the beginning of the war, the Christian community was just a little over 1,000 people, 1,017 to be precise. And now it is reduced to approximately 650 people in a sense. There has been 42 deaths 20 of them are related to the hostilities of the war. I mean, with the attack on the Greek Orthodox Church early in the war, 17 people lost their lives when the building collapsed. An additional 3 people were sniped, basically, 2 of them on our own premises in the Holy Family Church. In addition to the 20 who have been killed, in a sense, there are 22 other people who probably would have been with us today had there been proper medical attention. So no hospitals, no clinics, no medicines, and so on and so forth. So if you get sick, even a minor sickness in a sense that could be treated, most likely you will lose your life. So 22 additional people lost their lives unnecessarily in a sense. So 42 people out of 1,017, roughly, that's 4% of the community. So for any community to lose 4% in a span of under 1 year is devastating. And that, again, is a little higher than the general population in Gaza, having 40,000 people who have lost their lives. Over 60% of them are children and women. So the level of destruction, the level of killing, the level of loss, basically is just nothing that we have seen in this land in recent history. And I'm old enough to have witnessed the 1967 war, basically thereafter 1973 war, the 2 intifadas, the crisis, everything that we've been through in a sense does not measure up to what we are going through now in a sense. So as far as Gaza is concerned, this is the situation. Again, about 300 people left the Gaza Strip, primarily due to the difficulties of life there. And that is when the Rafah crossing was still open. So again, to lose 30% due to immigration, again, is another huge hit for the Christian community in Gaza. In addition, most of the Christian institutions have been destroyed. So as far as our schools are concerned, there are 5 Christian schools in Gaza. 4 of them are almost completely destroyed. The only standing one actually is our own Holy Family School, which is part of the parish complex right next to the church, basically. And that is the only school that survived, basically. And primarily because, again, that is being used as a shelter. So at the present time, we have approximately 450 people who are taking shelter at our Holy Family Church in Gaza City, plus another 200 roughly Christians who are taking refuge at the Greek Orthodox Church. So between the 2 churches, that is where most of the Christian community is today. Of course, the difficulty is when the war stops. If it stops tomorrow, these people have no place to go back to. There's no home to go back to, in a sense. So the school, even if it is standing, will not be able to be used as a school in the near future until some housing is arranged for these people to go back to, in a sense. So it's quite a devastating, I think, scenario as far as the Gaza is concerned. Going quickly to the West Bank, and I know Laila will speak a bit more about the West Bank. There are 3 factors since the beginning of the war that have shot up unemployment through the roof. Basically, when you talk about the collapse of the tourism sector, and that is the livelihood of the Christian community, especially in the Bethlehem and Jerusalem areas. When you talk about the suspension of all permits to work in Israel, you're talking about 120,000 households who used to work in Israel on a daily basis. All of those permits, most of them, not all of them, but most of them, over 95% of those permits have been suspended since the beginning of the war, of course. And then the almost bankrupt Palestinian National Authority, again, with 180,000 civil servants who are not getting paid since October. If they're getting paid, then 20% advance on the salary of November, December, or whatever it is. So if you put all these combined, the unemployment rate shot up dramatically and affected the Christian community unproportionately due to these factors, due to where they are, and so on and so forth. In addition, of course, to the settler violence, which I'm sure if you follow the news, you see how violent the settlers have become in recent months, leading to travel restrictions. So even if you have a job, if you live in an outlying village and you need to get to work on the West Bank, you're risking your life actually getting on the West Bank roads for the most part. Confiscation of land, land grabs basically that is unprecedented since the 1967 war. So there's not much left actually of the West Bank that has not been confiscated by the Israeli authorities for the primary purpose of establishing or expanding existing settlements on the West Bank. So in practice, basically, the West Bank has been annexed unofficially, of course, because Israel does not want the world to react to a formal annexation of the West Bank, but in reality, on the ground, the West Bank has been annexed already, not formally, but for all practical purposes, that is the situation. As far as East Jerusalem is concerned, again, the loss of jobs in East Jerusalem has been great due to many jobs lost, primarily to closure of businesses, especially in the tourism industry. And what distinguishes this time compared to COVID, at least, during the COVID, the Israeli government was very generous in a sense of compensating businesses, individuals who have lost their employment, had to close, shut down their businesses or whatever. So economically, Israel did not distinguish between Arab, Jewish, Muslim, Christian, or whatever, as far as getting support from the government back during the COVID times. At the present time, of course, anything that is Palestinian, anything that is non-Jewish, does not receive any governmental funding under the pretext, basically, that you haven't suffered. Those who have suffered are really those that are in reserve in the army, that shut down their business to go and fight in Gaza or what have you. So if you're in those categories, you're being compensated generously from the government. But if you're simply shut down your restaurant because there are no tourists around or whatever, tough luck, no government support whatsoever. And this is what really has distinguished, I think, the COVID days and to the current situation. The demolition of homes in East Jerusalem continues unabated, unstopped, basically. And I think as far as the institutions are concerned, I think we're talking about a situation where the government is actively pursuing issues they haven't pursued in a very, very long time, in particular to property taxation as far as the churches are concerned. If we are to pay according to the Israeli law, property taxation, I guarantee you all the churches will go bankrupt tomorrow. We will not have the means to be able to pay up, basically. And that really goes back to the Ottoman Empire days, where we had exemptions from taxation, basically, provided that church institutions provide services to the community, whether it's in education, health, or social services. All that is being changed now without making a big deal out of it. And church institutions are now requested to pay taxation on properties unjustifiably and without an agreement between the Holy See and the State of Israel, in a sense. So put all those combined, basically you have a disaster situation as far as East Jerusalem is concerned. And I think one of the most, I think, difficult issues really is the polarization between the two societies. They have been drifting apart for a long time, but the polarization you feel between the Israeli society, the Arab society, Jews on one side, Muslims and Christians on the other side, is something we haven't seen to this level, at least in a very long time. And that is something that would take a very long time, I think, to fix. Moving to the interventions of the Latin Patriarchate, as far as Gaza is concerned, we have big dreams. Our Patriarch Cardinal Pizzaballa really has big dreams to do many things in Gaza when the situation allows it, whether in education, healthcare, social services. However, since the beginning of the war, we have received up to a maximum of 650 people as refugees in our complex, and trying to provide all their needs during the war period at a time when you're really under blockade, under bombardment. It truly has been a heroic effort as far as our people in Gaza are concerned. So we provide the means for them to be able to provide food, water, sanitation, hygiene packages, medicines as much as is available on the market, and so on and so forth. And we've been doing that faithfully since the beginning of the war. Once the war is over, again, as I said, we have plans to re-establish our educational enterprises, 2 schools at least in Gaza, clinics, medical clinics, and so on and so forth, and potentially also get engaged in housing projects, basically as a quick fix to the people to sort of encourage them to remain in Gaza, especially those that have lost everything. As far as the West Bank is concerned, initially in the first 2 months of the after the war, that is November, December, basically, it was all humanitarian support, social assistance, tuition support, food coupons, medicines, rental support, utility support, helping people pay their electric bills, water bills, and what have you, school tuition fees, and so on. But we couldn't continue to do basically the pure humanitarian stuff. And we had to recalibrate ourselves to engage in more empowerment programs, job creation programs, and that started actually in January. So starting in January, we continued to do the pure humanitarian at a reduced level, basically, for those who are the most in need, who have lost their employment in particular. But we shifted to job creation programs, internships, cash for work programs, and a way to get people to work and to earn a living, basically, during these difficult times. So most, if not all, of our projects, the capital development projects at the Latin Patriarchate were shifted or repurposed, in a sense, to be cash for work and job creation projects. We dumped the concept of one contractor who does it all, in a sense, and we hired, local people, basically, to do the work, electricians, tilers, and so on and so forth. And that really generated, hundreds of jobs, probably at last count about 400 jobs, temporary jobs, between all of these categories combined, to put people to work and have a dignified income for them. And as far as the food coupons and all that pure humanitarian, the count, really, we have reached over 12,000 people since the beginning of the war in terms of, supporting them. And we're proud, really, that we have engaged Friends of the Holy Land in having an emergency sort of emergency edition, if you will, of the AFAQ project with Bethlehem University. And that is, again, a job creation, internships, and starting employment, not starting businesses, basically, income generation projects. And we're very proud that we partnered in that emergency setting with Bethlehem University. That program was ending, basically, when the war started. And we started a new phase, which we call the emergency edition of the AFAQ project, that basically is to empower people to either find employment or empower them to start some sort of a small business to sustain themselves. The last comment before I stop, and I know I exceeded my 10 minutes, basically, is that this is not the first war that we have seen in this land. And thus, we're frequently asked, are you worried about the Christian presence? And I say, no, we're concerned, certainly, but we're not worried that the Christian presence in the Holy Land will disappear. Basically, we've seen wars before, and the Christian institutions are strong in their contribution to society in various sectors, and they're all standing on their 2 feet, and they're all eager to provide the services that are needed once this war is over. So, as difficult as it is, basically, we assure everyone that we'll continue to be here. We'll do what we can to support our communities despite all the difficulties. Thank you very much, and I will stop here.
Thank you very much, Sami. I don't see any questions in the chat, so perhaps we leave that to the end of the session. Laila, perhaps you can tell us a little bit more about what's happening, particularly in the Bethlehem area where you live, but also in the West Bank, how daily life is being affected.
Yes, sure. I think Sami has covered many things and left nothing for me to tell.
I'm sure you have plenty.
But anyway, thank you. Good evening, everyone, and thank you again for joining That's really very important for you to know what's happening in the Holy Land, and specifically in Bethlehem, where I live. Bethlehem at the moment is becoming one of the poorest areas, regardless to Gaza. Gaza, it's a special case. We cannot argue about Gaza. But in the West Bank, Bethlehem is becoming or came already one of the poorest areas in the West Bank. Why is that? Actually, because Bethlehem depends lots on tourism. 80% of the population depends on their income and on tourism, where it's now dead. Tourism industry, it's totally paralyzed because of the situation since October 7th. It dropped down to zero. And all the suppliers mainly shut down their businesses, including our business, one of them, one of many, restaurants, souvenir shops, hotels, and those employees were sent back home because there is no income to pay them any salaries. Some of the businesses paid to a few months after, a couple of months after October 7th, but at the end they decided they cannot afford it anymore. So families are struggling to survive, to sustain themselves because of the lack of income. It's true that the institution are helping. FHL is playing very important role in supporting the Christians in the West Bank, but still that is not enough, which increase the rate of the migration of the population, the Christian population. And mainly those who can afford it to leave the country, they are leaving without hesitation. I know of many families who are living in Bethlehem are no longer in Bethlehem because they left the country seeking better standard of life, better opportunities where they can work, where they see a better future for their children, for their kids. I am a grandmother, and honestly speaking, I have 3 grandchildren. And honestly speaking, at this stage, we cannot see any future for our growing grandchildren, and this is very sad. I feel pain saying that, but this is the reality. As a family living in Bethlehem area, their parents are very much concerned. It's true that again the Patriarchate, the institutional, the churches are trying to keep the people living here and not to leave the country. But nevertheless, we have high rate of immigration, which again is very sad. I would say, Sami, I know the concerns of the churches, but I don't know how you can see in 20-25 years from now how we can see the Holy Land. Will be Christians here? I don't know really. We are not sure. Anyway, Friends of the Holy Land, talking about the Friends of the Holy Land, they are playing a major role here, trying to support with their different projects that they apply. As Sami just said, educational, small projects for families to start up or to continue or to survive, hoping that the situation will be better soon, but it's not an easy life at all. Nothing is easy to get. The closure, the ongoing the invasion of the Israeli in the West Bank, cutting off the roads, building the settlements, restrictions on movement. All these difficulties are making almost impossible for people to live in peace, or in peace in mind, or to get their income. The needs, the daily need for them, it's hardly to get, really. I speak with the experience being in Bethlehem, and I always share that with the Friends of the Holy Land, to try to push in different ways to help the families here, especially when there are children and lack of food, lack of basic things.
Okay.
So yes, as I said, 80% of the population lost their jobs. Those that were working in tourism, few of them got some permits to go to Israel, but that's a very small number. And the rest of the population, because Israel won't give permits, and Sami would confirm that it's not easy to move from one area to area, because as Palestinians we need special permits that should be issued by the Israeli state or Israeli authority. So we are in Bethlehem, in a closed area, very closed area, mainly in a prison, in an open prison that really make it tough and very difficult for people to survive.
Thank you, Laila. I before I answer a few questions, I just wanted to, first of all, the people here today, obviously thank you for your continued prayers and support for our mission over the last years and months. And really what I wanted to emphasize, and why I brought this meeting together, is picking up on what Sami is saying. There's been a step change, I think is the best way of putting it, in the conditions, not only in Gaza, which is so obvious from what we see on the news, but in the West Bank particularly. And we are seeking to plan for the long term. I mean, I think if there was a ceasefire tomorrow and no violence tomorrow, there would still be the issue with the border. There were, what Sami hasn't mentioned is Israel has brought in about 80,000 foreign workers to replace the Palestinians that used to work and travel into Israel, because the Israeli economy was suffering. So they brought in replacement labor. I can't see that the relations between the Israeli government and the Palestinian Authority, whomever that is, whomever's governing the West Bank and Gaza at the end of this war, will be any better, so that taxation funds flow from the Israeli government to the Palestinians, so that they can pay the wages that are some sorely needed. As Sami has said, in any other country, being working for the government in the public sector is seen as a secure job, but I know in the West Bank, teachers have been on strike because they've not been paid for 3 years their full salary, and everybody else is suffering, getting maybe 20%, 30% of their salary. And then lastly, I have tried, you can ask Peter and others, I have tried to inspire people to plan for a visit on a pilgrimage in 2025, but I'm one of the few voices that is saying that. Talking to people I know who traditionally lead pilgrimages, I don't see anybody planning to try and take a group probably until 2026 if things were to get better in the next few months, and who knows when that will be. So as Friends of the Holy Land, we are looking at ourselves, we're looking at the work we're doing, and we are trying to plan for the next 2 to 3 years. And that's really why I brought you together, because I'd like you to hear the impact and the ideas we have. We are working with partners such as the Latin Patriarchate, and we are obviously not moving away from one of our core projects, which is emergency support. So since the war has begun, we have increased our support. We're now providing support at the rate of £15,000 a month to people who are either referred to us, and this is across the West Bank, not just in Bethlehem, who are referred to us either by their parish priest or come to the office. And that sort of falls into two categories. We have people who need primarily emergency help to pay for medical procedures because there's no medical insurance of any significance in the West Bank, and medical treatment is expensive. Some of that support is to help with utilities because some people get well behind on their utility bills. We are not doing a lot of the food support because the local churches, such as the Patriarchate, as Sami has said, have a very good program for that. But we're picking up on all these people who have emergency needs that we can meet. The other side of that is we're picking up on people who have chronic illnesses and need medication on a regular basis. So we are helping them by giving them typically enough funds to cover 3 months medication at a time. So we are more committed than ever to the emergency support. But building on what Sami has been saying, we are focused heavily on employment. We are working alongside in Father Rami, who's working in the main parish in Bethlehem, but we're also working in the Ramallah area to employ people on a temporary basis. And in our scheme, we're committing to people for 3 months, and we're asking them to work up to 20 hours a week, and we're giving them, depending on the work they're doing and the amount of hours that they're committed to, between 1,500 shekels and 2,000 shekels a month, which, to give you an idea, 1,500 shekels is about 320 quid. 2,000 will be closer to 400. Enough to keep the family going. And we at the moment have budgeted to support just over 60 families in that work, and that will be for the next quarter. And we're continuing to fundraise for that program and work alongside the Latin Patriarchs program as well. Alongside that, as Sami mentioned, we have done the AFAC program. Now, the AFAC program was 18 small businesses that we helped get off the ground through the work and the assessment both of the Latin Patriarchate and the Bethlehem University. We are expanding that. So in addition to continue to support the AFAC program, we have our own small program where people are coming from across the West Bank. The maximum size grant that we are giving is $3,000. And those grants are for equipment, for them to be able to set up a business, whatever that equipment is. But if I can tell you that, I mean, the AFAC program is a good example. Out of the total AFAC program, I think 40 businesses were created. The application was 10 times that. There was about 400 people, and we're facing the same. We have huge application for these programs. So that is how we are trying to respond in terms of newer programs. We are building our existing programs. We are doubling the size of our vocational program to help young students get into training so they get a job. We have doubled the number of nurses that we will be supporting at Bethlehem University in their studies. And our vocational program runs at 50% of the course cost. So for a nurse, that's $2,000 a year for 4 years. For the another area we support is in hospitality and IT, where there's a vocational school in Ramallah, and again that course is running around $4,000 for 2 years, and they come out. 90% of the people graduating from these courses go into work. Yeah. And finally, we're working with the Salesian College. Salesian College are teaching trade skills, carpentry, electrical systems, solar power, etc. We've doubled the number of students that are going into the 1-year course for that. And we're also working with 2 schools, one of which is a Terra Sancta school and one is the Latin Patriarchate school in Bethlehem, where we're working with students in their last year of school. So they do 2 days with the Salesians, learning practical skills for a technical qualification as well as a school leaver certificate. All of this is engagement, is to help people see that they can live and there is a future for them in the West Bank, because they will go into work. From a practical perspective, one of the keenest felt situations when you visit the West Bank is a situation with water, which Sami can tell you about. But when I was in Bethlehem in May, the houses were receiving water on average 2 days a month. Yeah. And we have before done programs to put water tanks on people's roofs so they can store the water when the water is on. And we've increased that, those projects. We had completed a project in Bethlehem where we put water tanks on the roofs of 48 families. And we're working with the Latin Patriarchate in Sept on a project which is similar, but for a greater number of houses. And at the same time, we're building some shallow wells so they can receive water. This is a critical situation because of really 2 things. The World Health Organization produced a report some time ago about the health of children in the West Bank and how they disproportionately suffer from gastroenterital issues, and that's a lot to do with the water quality. And of course, that impacts them both in terms of their development and in terms of their, physical development, but also in terms of their education, because they're not attending school. What's come to my attention recently, this is also a major issue in East Jerusalem. There's a major court case happening at the moment where the water to supply to some parts of East Jerusalem has been curtailed to a similar level as it has in the West Bank. The bottom line is that people in the West Bank, people in parts of East Jerusalem, are receiving water below the minimum standard ascertained by the World Health Organization for normal life. And we're doing what we can to improve that situation. So I wanted to give you this idea of what we are doing now, but also give you the commitment that we are continually assessing how we can increase our support such that people will feel the impact in a way that will count against the conditions which I don't see, and I think others would agree, will change significantly for years to come. So we are going to need people to help us get that word out to their friends, family, and community, because this need is, if anything, increasing over the next couple of years. So I see now we have a few questions in the chat. Let me address some of those. So Sami, maybe you can answer this. If families and young people and students are leaving the West Bank or Gaza to go abroad, where do they go, and are they allowed to come back?
It depends, of course, where you are, and if you're in Gaza and have left Gaza, the chances of a return to Gaza under the current circumstances is non-existent. You cannot return. As far as the West Bank is concerned, it's a little bit easier. You can still, mobility borders are still open. You can go in and out. However, as far as the people who have left Gaza, this is just a little reflection. We're in contact with many people who have left Gaza, and some of them, despite the difficulties of the war, in a sense, tell us that they regret having left Gaza, actually, because what they have left is home, basically, to a foreign land that they know no one in, and they don't have the resources, neither the mechanism of support, basically. A young chap, I was in touch with a young chap who left to Australia, basically, and he said for the first 3 months they were on a tourist visa. So they couldn't work, they couldn't go to school, they couldn't do anything, basically, as long as they were tourists, let alone the incredibly expensive cost of living there with the little resources that they had out of Gaza. Basically, they're having a very, very difficult life there. And, basically, they said we shouldn't have left. So, just to comment also on what Laila mentioned, I know the immigration is a problem, certainly, and we should do whatever we can to try to stem immigration. However, my feeling is if we end up after this nasty war in a situation that leads us to some sort of a settlement of our never-ending Palestinian problem, basically, I believe most people will return, would love to return, in a sense, and restart their lives in the Holy Land. So as painful and difficult as the immigration issue is at the present time, we're hopeful that some good will come out after this horrible time that we live today, and that people will start to come back. And people did return after the first Intifada and after the second Intifada. We had waves of Christian immigration during those Intifadas. And then ultimately, some of them came back to help rebuild and some settled, of course, in their, the new land they ended up in. So basically, this is where it stands.
Okay, and for people who have left or emigrated, as we talk about, I understand they can come back, but it's not the easiest thing to do to come back and resettle in the West Bank. Is that correct, or is that just an impression?
I mean, it depends on what circumstances they left under.
Okay.
Some people leave, their belongings, their homes, their properties behind, in a sense. And for those people, it's relatively easy to come back because they're not starting from zero.
Right.
But for those who really don't have the means or have sold everything that they had before they leave, in a sense, then it becomes certainly more difficult to reestablish yourself, for sure.
Okay.
So it really depends.
But
Okay.
when people feel the sense of liberty and freedom in other countries, especially the young people, they will be hesitant to come back. That's because they say, we've heard them saying, why we are losing our lives in this restriction and difficulties and major challenges. No, we are happy. We are free there. We can move from one side to another. So basically, we cannot blame them. So not all of them. Not all of them come back.
I don't think we blame them. I understand that, Laila.
Yeah.
I wonder, maybe you could help me with this one, Laila, because I mean, we have these youngsters who are learning to be carpenters, electricians in the West Bank. Now, I know the economy is suffering greatly, and that's right now, but obviously as they graduate, there is an opportunity for them to work because people still need things to be fixed and rebuilt and things like that. But just give me an insight. So the average earnings in the West Bank, are significantly lower than what they could earn previously in Israel. I mean, what would somebody working in a small business like a plumber or a carpenter, or what would you think that they may be able to generate as an income today?
It's 100 shekels per day, which
Mm.
comes like 20 pounds. Well,
Mm.
some give, some owners or some businesses give even 80 shekels,
Right.
which less than 20 pounds.
Yeah.
Around. Others might get 120. So this is around. This is the range that they pay in Jerusalem. A day, a labor day, it's 350, 400 shekels, even up to 500 shekels. If I am not wrong, Sami, you can correct me, please, as you are in Jerusalem. But in Bethlehem, it's very, very basic payment for those who work like as a carpenter or plumber or whatever. Yeah, so it's not enough for a family with children. It's not enough. Never is enough.
So there's a question here which I think I can sort of answer, but Sami, maybe you can help me. Somebody's asking about if they can visit in the next few weeks. I think the Foreign Office is advising against all travel to Israel unless it's essential travel. And as I recall, they're saying that you should not travel in any circumstances to the West Bank. I think that's the state at the moment. The challenge, therefore, if you want to go, is you will not get insurance. So that's the first thing to bear in mind. The other thing to bear in mind from my experience is the flights are expensive and not as frequent as before because there's less airlines flying, I think. Am I right, Sami? I think it's El-Al is flying. I think British Airways. I mean, to give you an idea, British Airways at the moment is not, they're doing a stopover in Cyprus, which adds 2 hours to the flight because they don't wish their crew to stay in Tel Aviv. So I think you'll face that issue as well. So the short answer is, I think for most people, visiting at the moment is probably not a good idea. But please do advocate. Please, get our news, sign up for our news, listen to our conversations. I want to remind everybody here that, myself and my good friend Peter spend a lot of our time talking in churches. Yeah. I'm in a church this coming weekend speaking at all of the masses, and I'll be returning to a meeting of people to just raise more information, because there is this whole thing about spreading the awareness of actions you can take, practical actions you can take to help respond to the needs on the ground. And I think we get great information support from the Latin Patriarchate, and Sami is always available to talk if we can get a decent sized group together. So in terms of how we can continue to do that and advocate, if you have some ideas, if you have some parishes, if you have some schools or other community organizations, we will, myself, Peter, and other advocates within Friends of the Holy Land are very happy to come and speak to groups and give them the latest information and show people how they may be able to help us or help the people on the ground. Now, are there any other questions from anybody? Because I don't see any more in the chat. Does anybody have some questions they'd like to ask?
I would like to share with you, as maybe some of you knows, that I look after the elderly ladies at
Yes.
Which is FHL is the only supporter that support the house. We have 30 ladies, elderly, mostly 75 years and over. We have up to 90 years old. Recently, or the last week, we had 2 ladies. One of them is 84 years, 84 years, sorry, and the other close to 80. They joined us again, back to the word immigration, because their sons left the country and they've been left alone at home. There are no one to look after them. So they heard about St. Martha, and they were very happy joining to this social environment that we provide, including food and some other activities, and beside the medical support, and as Peter just mentioned, the hospital that visited and all of that. So it is, the challenges are on all levels, not just on the young people or the middle age. It's also on the seniors, being alone with no income, no support, where they need carers. There are no carers around. So life, it's not getting any easy at all. All the opposite, it's getting more difficult over here.
Hello, Peter. Yes, you have a question.
Thank you, Brendan. I think this question of emigration, particularly from the West Bank, is very important in terms of communicating messages over here in the UK. My understanding was that out of 40,000 Christians in the West Bank, sorry, 24,000 Christians, 40,000 out of in the West Bank, of which half are in Bethlehem, 60 families had emigrated, Christian families had emigrated from Bethlehem, and 10 families from elsewhere in the West Bank. Now, I'd ask your comment on that as a reality, but to me, whether the figure is low or whether the figure is high, we should be using it much more effectively as part of our messaging over here. Because if it's low, that shows the resilience of the Palestinian Christian community to stay in the country of their birth. And if it's high, it actually demonstrates what the real challenge is for the future. We need to bear in mind that the overall mission of Friends of the Holy Land is to retain a Christian community in the Holy Land. That's the overall mission of FHL, is to retain a Christian community in the Holy Land. So I think that if there were any facts that were available, and I appreciate these may be difficult to get, then I think they would be very valuable to share. I just wondered, Sami, what your thoughts on that were, and indeed on the availability of the facts of Christian communities, families emigrating from the West Bank.
So, Peter, I recall during the second Intifada, the years 2000, 2002, and so on and so forth, my wife is from Bethlehem, and there were 28 members of her family that actually left the country. 28 members. That was a substantial, in a sense, number of one family leaving in a span of 1 or 2 years. Many of them returned and are successful in Bethlehem and are happy. That's why I feel I'm the optimist. Some people are not as optimistic as I am regarding the future of the Christian presence. You need to remember that the institutional presence is a very strong institutional presence as far as the presence of in the Palestinian territories. At least you have close to 300 Christian institutions providing services in education, healthcare, and social services, and that is by no means any proportionate to our size demographically. We're under 1% population, yet we provide roughly 45% of the services in education, healthcare, and social services as far as the Palestinian population is concerned. I would start to worry if some of these institutions start to shut down, go bankrupt, decide it's a hopeless case and we need to, shut down the operations and move on. We haven't seen that yet, and I hope we don't see it. As far as we have a strong Christian institutional presence, which is the backbone of the Christian presence in the Holy Land, I would not worry too much about it. You have these cycles of ups and downs, and we can sustain them, I think, in the long term. Our job really as church officials, in a sense, is to ensure really that these institutions remain strong and remain, I think, at the forefront of providing a value set quality service, in a sense, that is not paralleled by anything else that you see in the Holy Land. Look at what Laila is doing as far as the elderly. If it wasn't for that Christian value set that is part of the delivery of the service, then basically what are we doing here in the Holy Land? And this is what characterizes, I think, that Christian presence. And we're not here to serve our Christian community only. If we are, I'll be the first to pack my bags and leave. As far as our 44 schools, the Christian Latin Patriarchate schools spread in Palestine, Israel, and Jordan, we run the largest network of schools, Catholic schools in the Holy Land. 50% of our students, of our 20,000 students, or 10,000 students, are not Christian. In Palestine, that's even a higher percentage of non-Christian. We only have 34% Christian students in Palestine. Yet, you have a waiting line of Muslim students lining up to basically be part of that educational process that is value-based. And we're very proud of our contributions into society, in a sense, as part of that service delivery. I can't imagine a society without that value set that is basically part of the upbringing of the Muslims who receive that service, basically, or sometimes Jewish in certain areas in the north, basically, and what impact that has in sort of stabilizing a society that is inflicted with war. Where else do you hear that Christian message of reconciliation and love and peace and understanding and accommodation and so on and so forth, if it wasn't for our Christian institutions? So in many ways, I think we have to look beyond our numbers. We have to look at our institutions. We have to ensure that our institutions remain strong, basically, because their impact on a balanced society it cannot be underestimated in our Holy Land. So yes, it's difficult and continue to be difficult, and it may get more difficult, to be honest with you. But honestly, we have a responsibility, and I think we'll live up to that responsibility as long as we can. What Laila mentioned early in her presentation, what would the Holy Land look in 20, 25 years? I don't even want to think that, honestly. Let's concentrate on today, on tomorrow, and the day after, and ensure that we do our bit, in a sense, and hope that the next generation will do their bit, as we have carried over from the previous generations, in a sense, and hope for the best.
Sami, can I thank you for that? I think that 1% population figure, which of course we know, but that 45% of the institutions providing education and social support being Christian, I think is very powerful, and a message that certainly gives hope to the foundation of Christianity in the Holy Land, and one that I'm sure Brendan will pick up and use. Thank you very much indeed, Sami.
Yeah, thank you, Sami, because I think this is also a very important message for us to get to people who are looking how to support the resolution of this crisis. Because what I always say when I meet with leaders, secular and religious, is that the Christian organizations to whom you refer, Sami, have the track record going back centuries of being able to do this work. And they're the organizations that need the support rather than some new, shall we say, response to an emergency type situation. I wanted to thank you, Sami, so much for the insights. I want to thank you, Laila. I was very amused because we have a program we've put in St. Martha's House where Laila founded. Because of the war, prices of food have gone up, what, 20% or something in the last 10 months? And so the old ladies were not eating properly. So we increased our budget for quality nutritional food and have a nutritionist there. And we had a report only the other week of an old lady in her 80s who put on a kilo and very proudly telling me about it. So that was great. I just want to emphasize that's the sort of work and impact we can have at Friends of the Holy Land. I wanted to thank you for your support and show you that, you know, we are planning for not just the next month or the next 6 months, which we may have done in the past. We're now planning for the medium term because I see these conditions remaining, if not deteriorating for some time. And I ask you to think about how you can help us share that message, share that awareness across your friends, family, and community so that we can begin to generate more of a multi-year view as to how we can support these kind of projects. I wanted to also say to you that, you know, I'm personally available to meet with people, which I'm hoping to do in the months ahead, if they want to know more specifically about projects, because I know that, you know, people like to hear about specific projects. And I'm going to share with you, if I'm able to, very quickly on my screen, barcode. And if you were to take that or get in touch with our office, we have a short form for people who may want to know more and may want to meet with me either individually or as a group in the next 3 months. I'm trying to fill up my time with meeting people face to face and talking about how we can make it to get a difference together. I'd like to close the session, if possible, now with a prayer. And I wanted to read the prayer that we have on the back of the latest update that I sent around last month to everybody. And it goes like this. Lord Jesus, teacher, healer, and savior, whose kingdom will know no end. Empower with your spirit our brothers and sisters in faith in the land you made holy. Make them strong in faith, hope, and love. May they know your presence and peace as your light pierces the darkness that cannot overcome it. When suffering and injustice seem unending, we pray for Samud, the steadfast endurance and resilience that we find in you. As Jesus maintained his faith even unto death on a cross, strengthen the faith of those in Palestine and Israel and around the world, who wait and hope and pray and work for the justice that is the root of true peace. Bless the work of Friends of the Holy Land, enlighten our vision, empower our partnership, and make us bearers of good news. For the sake of your holy name, accompany all who seek to serve you and their neighbors in daily acts of hope and faith. In this endeavor, make every one of us agents of your peace, O God. So may we join people of goodwill who raise before Jerusalem's gates their insistent prayer. Peace be within your walls. Peace be within you. Amen.
Wow.
Thank you. And thank you particularly, Sami and Laila, because it's late there, I know. And we will do our best to support the fantastic work that you are doing in the Holy Land. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's good to see you, Sami. Has been
Same here.
time since,
Yes.
since we've met last time.
Ironically
No
through the
permission
UK.
to go to Israel, you know that.
Well,
For
I
sure.
know when I was there traveling it now between Jerusalem and Bethlehem is not the easiest. They keep changing the checkpoints, yeah.
Yeah.
And digging up the road. But anyway,
God bless
Oh.
everybody.
God
God
bless. Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thank you
Sami.
all.
Bye, Laila.
Thank you.
God bless you all.
Bye-bye.
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 Bye.
God bless everybody.